that fucking uncanny valley voice. Anyway, welcome to the Slate Talk. My name is James. We're doing this for paydirdfs.com. If you don't have a subscription, you should grab a subscription. I am joined by Pablo today. Pablo knows. And we're going to be talking some Week 8 NFL. We've been bullshitting off mic, but him and I both agree that this slate is, at the very least, interesting. I don't know if I like this slate. So hopefully I like it more by the end of this slate talk, but I don't know if I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I like it for two reasons, but I'll admit that it feels like a slate where there's a lot of minefields, and here's why I like it, and then I'll counter my own like of the slate. I like it because it's big, and I think people are overwhelmed, and I think I'm hearing across the industry like some very thin logic, and I think that happens when people are overwhelmed. They start to create narratives and they get a little bit too fancy. And I think the other reason I like it is because I think there's some good chalk, but I also think there's, from what I can tell, some fairly shaky chalk with some really easy pivots. It does feel like a slate where you're going to have to nail like some of the good chalk, and then you're just going to have to hit the right contrarian pivots around it. Like it doesn't feel like a slate where you can just fade all the chalk because there is some good chalk. But I do think that people are going to make enough mistakes just by the sheer size of the field, size of the slate, and the number of options, where if you can avoid some of the bad chalk and avoid some of the common mistakes, you don't necessarily need to be perfect, especially in smaller field, to have a chance for a good outcome. So that's why I like it. But admittedly, it does feel like a slate where there's going to be some big decisions you need to make, and which is true for most slates, but more true when there's some stronger chalk that you need to figure out what you're going to do around.
Yeah, it's one of those slates. So I just reran models. Like they're not even like fully live yet. The model is still like trying to figure out how to rerun itself. But I just reran models, and there's the player who has the most trending ownership is that Yoshitsivas fucking weirdo at 3,600. He's now projected for 20% ownership. I don't think he comes in at 20% ownership. Maybe he does, but I hate those kinds of plays with all of me.
Yeah.
Because I liked Cincinnati as a stack a lot at first, right? Like earlier I wrote up Cincinnati as a stack. I think it was yesterday I wrote them up. And I liked them overall, and for some fucking reason the models didn't catch that rerun that I just did on Yoshivas. Oh well. But I liked Cincinnati a lot, and now it's like, okay, if I'm gonna play a Cincinnati stack, then that means that I'm jumping on this board of 20% of people that likely play Yoshitsivas, and like I don't have to play Yoshitsivas, right? I can just play Burrow with Chase and then like fucking Gesicki, I guess. But I don't love when we have this big of a bomb dropped on a slate on Saturday. It just muddies things up and it makes things difficult. That being said, this slate was in desperate need of actual value. People were getting ready to eat chalk. Like everyone is going to play K. Dotton. K. Dotton was going to be something like 25 or something percent owned. There were people who were looking to play like fucking Jake Bobo, which doesn't sound like a real person, right? People were like the models that the contest sims were all over Devon Vele, who projects for 9 fantasy points. Like this slate needed some value. The problem is I don't think that Yoshivas is actually value. I think that he will project when all is said and done and the models are reran for something like 9 to 11 fantasy points. So he's not even real value. There's just so much fake value on this slate.
Yeah.
And I just don't like slates like that, because even though it is fake value, Yoshivas does have 4 touchdowns on the year. Like he can actually score 15 plus fantasy points if he gets like 5 targets and a touchdown. So
Yeah.
But I don't want to eat him because the projection on him is going to be really low. I'd much rather play somebody like Cedric Tillman, who the
Yeah.
models are all over. We fucking love Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
But, it's just I don't necessarily like slates like this where, as much as I like being contrarian, I like being it's kind of like I talked about in the showdowns on showdown season where I say that I like slates where I can easily find a leverage point, not slates where I have to depend on a lot of luck, and this feels like a lot of luck slate.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say. Two things about ownership on this slate. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games with totals over 45. Which is, not that crazy for a bigger slate, but we haven't had a lot of slates where we've had this many games with high totals.
Yeah.
So I think one thing to be aware of is that I don't think this is a slate where I feel a lot more freedom to stray from sort of the chalk stacks and the chalk plays, because there's just so many game environments that could lead to good outcomes. Obviously, there's going to be some that are better than others. Obviously, it's easier to correlate some quarterbacks and their stacks, and there's better bringbacks in some teams. But that combined with the slate size, just the number of games with high totals, and the size of the slate overall, to me, feels like you have a lot of freedom. And to your point, I think makes me more willing to sort of say, I'm not going to play like some of the thinner chalk if there's good alternatives more than I otherwise wouldn't. When I don't feel like there's as many other options. Now, admittedly, what's weird about the slate is that while there's a lot of good games with high totals, you're right that part of the reason Yoshivas is getting ownership is because the value is coming from essentially three main plays. It's coming from, and this is important to think about in terms of macro build structure. The value is coming from pay down quarterbacks, primarily Bo Nix, and some people will even go down to somebody should mute. Can you mute C Wilds?
Yeah, I got him. Oh, 1 second. Okay, muted.
I think it's C Wilds who's.
Yeah, no, I muted him.
Well, I can still hear him.
Oh well, hold on. Okay, now can you hear him?
Yeah, no, I can't. Thanks. Sorry. I mean, I don't give a shit. I think it's probably distracting to other people.
Yeah.
So I think that the value is coming from three general areas. One is the cheap quarterbacks, so Bo Nix, some Jameis, but primarily Bo Nix, especially in cash games. He's going to be very owned. Some people will even go down to like Marcus Mariota. Just in general, though, people will play some cheaper quarterbacks to get to some of the pay up flex positions that they want, that we'll talk about. Number two is there will be some folks playing a little bit of the cheap Tampa pass catchers, including Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, maybe some Sterling Shepard. I think primarily it's going to be McMillan because he's got the best pedigree and he's shown some flashes of like big play upside. And with their injuries, the ball's got to go somewhere. And then the third place is through the cheap tight ends, primarily Cade Otton, who's going to just be mega chalk. And so what that makes me sort of say macro-wise is, okay, so how do we play quarterbacks with more ceiling? Because there's no way you're ever going to convince me that Bo Nix is a good GPP play on a slate where you have Lamar, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, underpriced Tua with his pass catchers back. And I
Yeah.
know Tua will be pretty chalky, but and we'll talk about Tua. I think there's reasons for and against him being good or bad chalk. Um, um, and I think the other hard part about this slate is that while you want to play like Joe Burrow or Jalen Hurts, there's a lot of plays on this slate that are nice in theory, but then when you start to build and you start to realize that there's not that much value that you really like that much,
Mhm.
you start to say to yourself, like, okay, you play Burrow, Chase, and with a bring back like AJ Brown, it's really hard actually. Like I understand that you can go cheaper at running back. I understand you can play some of the cheaper wide receivers, but you're giving up to get to some of those pay ups. You're giving up a decent amount. So I think there's some games that are nicer in theory than they are in reality when you start to actually work through some build structures. And in a world where we're trying to get different to beat the field, I think you sort of start by saying, maybe a balanced build might be better, or and you start to look at the stacks and the ownership, and you start to ask yourself, are there some lower owned stacks that give me some salary relief that doesn't play into ownership as much, but gives me as much ceiling, even if on median I'm giving up some points, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's well, and speaking of that, that's one of the reasons why we run the stacks that we have, and you can see like there are reasonable stacks to make. I mean, a Baltimore stack with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman is only 19K. That's not atrocious. When you sort by 4K, like yeah, the Miami stack is by far number one, but that's Tua, Jalen Waddle, and Johnny Smith. Like nobody in their right mind is playing that. Right? You're
Yeah.
playing Tua with Tyreek instead of Jalen Waddle. But even then, I think it's only 1,600 more, so that's 16.7 or something. If you go Tua with Tyreek and Johnny Smith, like that's a value stack that you can use. The value stack that Paydirt wants to use is Jameis Winston with Cedric Tillman and David Njoku, and that's like that feels nice when you say it. Like when you say it out loud, and you're like, yeah, Winston, Tillman, and Joku stack. That feels awesome. But then you realize that Cleveland has a team total of 16.7 fucking 5. And
Yeah.
it's cheap because they're not projected to score basically any real life points. Now you
Yeah.
can argue up and down and say like, oh well, the Vegas total isn't accounting for Jameis Winston being that much better than XYZ, but I also think that it's worth saying that like as much as the DFS industry wants to say that Jameis Winston can be the savior of this Cleveland team, I'm willing to bet that if he could not like it's hard because there's the logical side of it where it's like, okay, if Jameis Winston is good enough to lead this team, then why was he behind Dorian Thompson on the depth chart, right? Like,
Yeah.
logically, that would tell me that he sucks at football at this point in his career, and we have not seen him play consistently in years. So I don't know. There's the logic side of that, and then there's the narrative side of it where it's like, oh well, they didn't want Winston to be behind Deshaun Watson because they wanted to rally the team behind Deshaun Watson as like fucking like hoorah bullshit. But I don't know. I don't know which side of that to believe, but Vegas says that it's the former and that Jameis
Yeah.
Winston is not that much better.
Yeah.
So, and they don't have
Yeah.
Amari Cooper anymore. And it's like, when you put all those things together, yeah, it's only 13.6K for that stack, but it might suck. On the
Yeah.
other
And
hand,
yep.
no, go for it really quick.
No, I was just going to extend that. I mean, I think there's some look. What's weird about the slate because of the size is that you would think that with this many games, with this many high totals, there'd be some really easy, obvious builds that make sense. But pricing is like actually tighter than you would think, and a lot of the value isn't that great. And so there's a lot of wish casting where people are going to say, okay, well, I'll just punt to Jameis with Tillman and Njoku. I think the more common thing will be to punt to Knicks. And then the other one that we've talked about a little bit in the Discord, and you got, you talked a little bit on X today, is there's just some like very thin wish casting because people are uncomfortable with the pay up stacks.
Mm-hmm.
And the other wish cast sort of narrative that people are playing into is, oh, Aaron Rodgers, Devonta Adams, this is like he's had another week with the offense. Him and Garrett Wilson have a huge target share. Breece Hall is going to be very, very heavy chalk. Maybe the chalkiest pay up on the slate, probably will be. And you get some leverage off Breece Hall with Devonta Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. And in the meantime, like to your point, you look at our median and ceiling outcomes, and you look at our 2x, 3x, 4x, and you say, wait a minute. We have Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman for 19.1K with bringbacks in either Tillman or Njoku, who are not going to be that owned.
Right.
Like, what the fuck are we doing here? Right? Like that's what I mean by this. That's what I mean by people getting overwhelmed by the slate size. I think when you have a slate size this big, and you see it in every sport, like you see it in but I think you especially see it in NFL because the narratives take hold so much more during the course of a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're legitimately going to see some Aaron Rodgers stacks, and I'm not saying Lamar's going to be unowned. I think he'll be. Right now, we have him as the fourth highest, but like we have him behind Bo Nix for sure. And then he's probably like in that range with Jordan Love, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow. I think Bo Nix Tua will be a lot more owned, but after that, like Lamar, and then other sort of pay up stacks, or to Tribe's point earlier today, even Jalen Hurts will be substantially less owned. So, and these are like good plays, good quarterbacks with good players with good stacks around them. Like you're not having to play like a shitty quarterback with some thin receiver. Like Lamar Jackson with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman is a really like strong stack, right? I mean, Jalen Hurts, it's tough because 7,500 and AJ Brown's expensive, but you can skinny him, right? I think we should just be cognizant of being a little more picky on a slate this size with a lot of good game environments and actually playing good players in good stacks and not just playing, good value on thinner teams in thinner environments.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I mean, I love that concept of like, why would we not just play Baltimore? I didn't even really think about that all the way through of like, oh, well, I don't really know if Jameis Winston is good or not and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, well, on the other side, we know that we have a quarterback who is good and the stack is not that expensive, and using Cedric Tillman, who's basically free, makes it even less expensive. Like that's just such a simple way to do that. But yeah, the Bo Nix thing and paying down, it is very fair, I think, to say that even though this is a big slate and I think people are going to make mistakes, it is to the point that you made earlier, it is actually hard to get these expensive stacks. Like there's a reason why Lamar Jackson is lower owned. There's a reason why, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, these guys are not projecting for much ownership. And I broke the models. Don't go look at them, but I broke them. But there's a reason why they're looking low owned and why somebody like Bo Nix is getting steam. And I heard somebody talk about Anthony Richardson, and I had multiple weird interactions on Twitter with people who are trying to convince me that Aaron Rodgers is a high upside play. I think that what it comes down to is that people are just uncomfortable with getting to the expensive stacks. But that will bring up my next point here. I think that when slates like this are a bit uncomfortable, I think that you can kind of ditch a lot of the general heuristics that you have and maintain to try to build in a way that is able to utilize the slim value that we have while still maintaining upside. And one way that I think you can do that is if you say wanted to have I'm looking through these expensive ones. Like one of the things that I was thinking about doing before the Cincinnati T. Higgins thing was going with Bo Nix and Devon Villay as a skinny, and then using Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together, and saying that I would hope that Bo Nix would at the very least be able to put up 15 to 17 fantasy points, and that Joe Burrow, for much more ownership, for much more salary than him, would only be able to put up, 18 to 22 or something, and that gap would not be large enough to where I wouldn't have been able to afford to do something with Joe Burrow that I couldn't with Bo Nix. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think kind of what you're hitting on here is just a willingness to be creative with build structure on a slate where traditional, stacking run back or game stacks isn't as easy as normal.
Yeah.
The other one that I heard mentioned on a pod I listened to earlier today was similar concept to the one you just mentioned, was playing Richardson naked with, two Houston bringbacks, like bringing back like Schultz and Diggs or Dell and Diggs. And sort of saying to yourself, like, yeah, like obviously Stroud probably has a good game, but if Richardson can get there and the price differential between Richardson and Stroud is big enough where then you can afford to pay up at running back or at your other wide receiver positions. And so I would add to that concept, which is that whereas I'm like usually a correlation, sort of a bit of a correlation Nazi, where like almost everything on my field in my lineups have to be correlated. And again, I'm coming from a smaller single entry or three max environment where those things tend to be more important because I don't need the pure nuts to win. Even for me on a week like this, like I'm much more willing to not have a bring back or to play a skinny and with a quarterback that I usually would think is a double. I'm not saying we should fully abandon those concepts, but I think I just think tighter pricing with a lot of optionality in the plays should make you feel like you have the ability to sort of build a little more freely with not quite as much forced correlation than you normally would have, or correlation in a way that's a little more creative than sort of those traditional ways of correlating.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I think that what it comes down to is when you don't have, because when you think about the way that you're building out a lineup, and for those that are listening, this is a much heavy roster construction version of this slate talk than we usually do. But I think this is a slate that requires it. The reason why you correlate is to unlock the upside that correlation and correlative effects bring, right? So one of the things that correlation gives you is an extra notch above the median projection that you should expect. However, when the median projections on correlated lineups are significantly lower than the medians on uncorrelated lineups, that correlation matters less than having the lineups that project better. So this is a concept that we talked a lot about in MLB, where as the slate gets smaller, raw points matter more because the chances that the correlation coefficient is going to give you upside past the regular medians that you have for baseball players, as the chances of that correlation go down, the raw points matter more. And I would say that this slate is very similar to that, where correlated stacks for NFL, if the median of a correlated stack that you're looking at is like, I don't know, 140 fantasy points or something, right? And the median of an uncorrelated stack is like 159 or something like that, it's better to go with that uncorrelated stack. That correlation is not going to make up that 15-point difference the way that you want it to. So I think that that's a really, really important thing to note in DFS. We kind of get locked into these ideas of, oh, you have to correlate, you have to correlate, you have to correlate. And to an extent, correlation is your friend in almost every instance. But when you lack actual value, when you're considering guys like Bo Nix and Devon Vele and et cetera, like when Yoshivas is going to be giga chalk and mostly sucks at football, it's like, why are we not just playing the best median projected lineups and like not killing ourselves trying to correlate these things and make these lineups quote unquote make sense?
Yeah, and that's where this is going to be like somewhat probably of an annoying week for, I wouldn't call them anti-sim bros, but I'm actually like a little bit of an anti-sim bro. I feel like a lot of the industry now is just, here are the plays I like. I got to see what the sims say. Like that is a very common approach now to NFL. It's similar to the way people have been playing NBA for a while, which is, I like this player, I like his stack partner, but I'm finding it hard to double him because they're expensive or there's not a good bring back. I'm gonna plug him in and just see what the sims tell me. Um, and I'm not knocking that like as an approach as much. Personally, I don't find it fun, but that's not a reason. I mean, if it's profitable, it's profitable, whether I think it's fun or not. But I'm just pointing out that to your point on median, sort of best plays median, and not forcing correlation, I do think this is going to be a slate where people who are used to using that approach are going to see that very quickly, and people like me who usually hand build very correlated lineups, you know, have a harder time abandoning those traditional concepts. One thing that I think would be probably useful for people to go a little less macro and a little bit more micro, because I'm sure people listening are also like, this is all great, but like, okay, tell me what you're thinking about, what plays are going to be interesting leverage, or what approaches specifically are going to be interesting leverage. Is, I think, as opposed to sort of going by games, and we can hit on some of the games, I think it might be interesting to look at this. And I know you're updating the models, but I'm sure like the pre-updated one I have from 20 minutes ago is still fairly decent. Um, I think it's interesting to look at some of the stacks and then go a little bit position by position to think about um, sort of stack, good chalk, bad chalk, and pivots. Because in a slate that's a little bit more play the best plays and don't worry that much about correlation, those decisions around some of the more chalky pieces are going to be pretty important. Personally, I'm just going to re-emphasize one of the initial points we already made about stacks, which is that I just think the range of outcomes on pay dirt make it really, really obvious. And I was happy to see this because I was already kind of liking it based on what I was seeing projections wise. That I just think Lamar stacks are very, very strong. I know Zay Flowers is a little bit banged up, but um, it's, you get enough salary relief with Bateman, and you have enough salary relief with Tillman coming back, that 19-1 as opposed to a Burrow double at 22 or a Hurts double at 22-3 is a really major difference on a slate like this. Like $3,200 difference in your stack for that amount of upside with a 2x. Their 2x it's the only 2x that has a median over 49 at that level, 2x and 3x. Other than that, they're all value stacks. It's like, it's the only pay up stack. It's the only pay up stack, if you sort by 2x and 3x, that has that range of outcomes, which to me makes it an incredibly strong stack. Because while other people are doing Tua or Knicks or whatever other shaky value plays in the skill positions, it's like the one stack, because Bateman and Flowers are cheap enough. And you add in the fact that Tillman on the other side is cheap, or if you can get to Njoku, who's a really strong play, that you don't have to sacrifice raw points to get the value that you would from the value stacks. And so that to me makes it just like a super attractive stack. And I think people who use pay dirt that's like a way that to me, the range of outcomes make it like a very obviously very strong play.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to not just play a Baltimore stack. Especially, you look at them, and it's one of the things where the heuristics kind of meet the projections. Like, we want teams that are going to score a lot of points. Okay, well, they have the highest team total on the slate. We want teams that have a reasonable value. Okay, well, they're one of the only teams that project really, really well and have a good 3x and 4x rate. We want teams that have a lot of upside from their quarterback. Okay, well, Lamar fucking Jackson. We want teams that have reasonable bringbacks. Okay, David Njoku, right? And he even covers a priority position as well, right? Like, it makes a lot of sense, and it's one of those plays where I think that there are a lot of people that are going to overlook it because of reasons X, Y, or Z, but that's just kind of the easy button play. As far as looking at it from a pivot point of view and like what else kind of matches it in terms of upside and price, I mean, it's not like it is a free stack.
No.
To be fair, 19K is still allocating a decent amount, and to be fair, if you get off Zay Flowers and instead you go with Mark Andrews, who has shown signs of life, right? Then it makes it a significantly more manageable stack. Or if you go, Isaiah Likely shows up as well as somebody who you can utilize. But other stacks kind of in this range, I just reran, so models now are live with Yoshiba. Yeah. That Cincinnati stack is 19.1K. I mean, it is basically the same price and the same projection. So that's the quote unquote pivot, but frankly, Baltimore is the pivot off Cincinnati.
That's the issue. That's the issue. Burrow, Chase, Yosivas is going to be, I think, the only thing that's going to keep Burrow, Chase, Yosivas, and we should talk about this next, just because I think it's such a chalky thing that everyone needs to be aware of it, and you need to think very clearly about what you're going to do around it if you play it. The only thing that's going to keep Burrow, Chase, Yosivas somewhat in check is Tua stacks, because Tua, Tyreek, Waddle, if we sort by median in the range of outcomes, and I just refreshed, is right below it for 18.5, right? And that's going to be mega chalk. So I do have faith that Burrow doubles are not going to be like out of hand because of the Miami pricing, but like there's like Yoshivas being the value he is and people's desire to play that game, is for sure going to steam Burrow. There's no doubt about it. And that's why the Lamar stack is actually the pivot.
Yeah, that Cincinnati stack's gonna be the second highest on the slate for sure. Baltimore, currently we have them for 17% some ownership, which is hilarious. If you go here's my Millie Maker winner. All right, Lamar Jackson plus Rashad Bateman plus Mark Andrews, and bring it back with the double TE with Njoku in the flex. That's your fucking Millie Maker winner right there. And if you want to like overstack that and say, yo, Jameis Winston is going to fucking put up points, have Cedric Tillman as well, and then just stack the nuts with studs. The rest, because you got the money.
Yeah. So let's talk about Miami. Let's talk about Miami for a minute. So I'm gonna give both sides of the coin, and then obviously I want your take.
Sure.
So here I'll start with the pros. Okay. The pros on Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle is, and if you want, you can include Achane on there, who projects really well both at Pater and across the industry. And I'll just point out Achane's the type of player who gets there through efficiency, not there so much through volume. So I don't have as much trouble playing an Achane with like a Hill or Waddle, because I don't find him to be as that type of player to be as inversely correlated with other players that are more volume dependent, because Achane can get there in like 5 plays, and you're not necessarily. I'm not saying there is no cannibalization off Waddle or Hill with him, but less so than a guy who's going to have to get fed all game, right? So the arguments for it are 2 in my book. One is price. Okay. Achane is 62. Hill, I think he's got a Q tag, but I think everything I've heard coming from the beat writers and across the industry is that he's probably fine. And I don't think it's going to scare a whole lot of people off him this week. But Hill at 7K, you know, it's just it's a really low price. And then you add in Waddle, who's 5,400. It's just Achane, Hill, and Waddle. There's a reason they're so chalky. Now, and the other reason to feel excited about it is that while Miami has been absolute garbage this year, even before Tua got hurt, they were not producing in the first few weeks. Last year, for at least the first half of the season, if not the first 2/3, they had multiple games that were like almost historic in production, in terms of upside, right? I mean, like they were setting records. So combine the price with last year's history of major upside games, and I'll add one more positive, which is that their total is healthy at 25. Not amazing, but in a matchup that is not scary to anybody against Arizona. That those are all good reasons to feel good about Miami. Now, the counterpoint is primarily that they've been garbage this year, and so and that they're going to be extremely owned, right? So if you think that they continue to be garbage and that the ownership is not mitigated by the price, then it makes you sort of say to yourself, I don't want to play into this much chalk with Tua doubles or even playing one-offs. I do find it hard to believe. Look, there's a chance Miami completely duds. Okay. I would be more willing to fade Tua stacks than I would be willing to tell people that they should completely fade Waddle, Hill, or Achane. Because I think there's a world in which Tua doubles don't necessarily get there, or Tua skinnies don't even get there. But Waddle, Hill, and Achane at their prices, it's very hard for me to imagine, unless the game completely duds and they score like 10 points, that one or two of those guys don't get there at their price. And so personally, I don't have a huge problem with it. I just think it's very important to be aware of the reality that it's going to be really, really owned, and you have to be really smart about building enough leverage around it so that you're not dead by just playing a cash lineup with them.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against Miami stacks. The thing is they're at their salary floors. And it's kind of like buying stocks where they justifiably, right? Like they've performed like shit. But it's a company that we know has been really, really good historically. They have really good IP. They are a really well-ran company. They have good management. They have good assets, shit like that. So it's like, you should probably buy them at the floor. Like regardless of what you actually think is going to happen, like it's very hard to time the markets. But point is that with Miami, they're at their salary floor. By the way, slur here. I'm already through one glass of wine, so I'm not gonna ignore
Hey
it.
James, is it my internet? Is it my internet that's cutting out, or yours? Because you're cutting out for me a little bit, but it may be my internet.
It's James.
My brother,
Okay,
it might be the wine. It might be the wine. No,
dude, it's unless your computer drank too, it's not the one. Like your audio cut out for like a few seconds here and there, a few times. In fact, you may be cut out right now again.
Is it better now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
It wasn't like you were gone for like a minute. You were gone for like 10 to 15 seconds at a time.
Okay, cool. Yeah, probably just a.
But we heard your buy low stock analogy with Miami, which I think is, yeah. Look, I don't think there's anything that much more to say. It's like they're really cheap. They were really good last year, but they're going to be very owned. So
let's put some
that's
stats
it.
behind it. Like Tyreek was averaging 23 fantasy points a game last year. He's averaging 10 this year, which sucks. But at 23 fantasy points a game, like he should be priced above Jamar Chase, who's 8,500. So,
Yeah,
I
and
do.
let's not ignore the obvious, right? Which is that Tua. I'm not saying Tua was good before he got hurt this year, but the last 4 weeks or whatever since he's been gone, they've been unplayable, right?
Yeah,
And he is back this week. So if he's healthy and he's back, and for all intents and purposes, as far as we can tell, like he seems to be normal. Like it's kind of like with like Aaron Rodgers, like let's just take one. Just I know I'm hammering this home, but I think that the narratives are really important to point out. Like people are going back 3 to 4 years, okay, and then saying stuff like, "Well, Devontae Adams has been here for 2 weeks, and it's leverage off Brees Hall." Like that's a much thinner narrative than Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Achane are all cheap as hell. Tua is back from injury and seems, as far as we know, to be healthy, right? And last year they produced at historic proportions. So like that's a much less of a stretch, right? So I have a lot less of a problem with that. I just think I'm just caveating that with the fact that I do think that will make them very chalky. Everyone knows that. So just be ready to pivot at least at a few positions and depending on how big your field size, more.
Yeah,
Around it.
the Miami situation is just one of those like it's so simple that we should just all do it. But people are going to find reasons not to. I think that they are right up there with Baltimore stacks. The problem is that they are very, very chalky. So the thing with Miami stacks, with Baltimore stacks, you can play whoever the fuck you want with them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
With Miami stacks, you do have to think about it a little bit because Miami stacks are going to be the chalkiest stacks on the slate. Tyreek Hill is likely to touch, I'm going to guess 35% owned, maybe higher than that in smaller field stuff that Pablo and I play. But, Tyreek's going to be super high owned. Miami's going to be high owned. I think Tua is probably going to end up being like 10 to 12% owned or something. He'll be the second highest QB on the slate, I think. So I do think that you have to care about it. That being said, if there was going to be a stack type that you could play that makes it easier to worry about who you are playing them with, you would much rather it be a cheaper stack like Miami than an expensive stack like Baltimore. Going back to kind of the roster construction stuff, if a really expensive stack is really popular, it forces certain constructions and forces certain avenues towards value. So, like, if everybody was going to be on a Baltimore stack with Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, if Mark Andrews was like 6K or something, there's only so many ways that you can make that work with a median that makes sense. But with Miami stack, because it's cheaper, there's a lot of ways that you can make it work. And you can get away from a lot of the chalk options that people are utilizing to make Miami stacks work. So what I would say is you absolutely should have Miami stacks tomorrow. Just make sure that you're doing it in a way that other people are not doing it. That doesn't mean that you have to like have a bring back from Arizona. It doesn't mean that you have to like fade every single good piece of chalk around it, but just think like if you were to build this lineup with your eyes closed and just slap your dick against the keyboard, like don't build that way. Try to at least have one key different rather than just building the same way that everybody else does.
So that's a good segue on the expensive stuff, with a couple things I want to bring up and ask you about because it's been mentioned in the chat and I think it's worth thinking about. So if we sort through median and ceiling, right, you see Jalen Hurts at the top for both median and ceiling with AJ and Devontae, 22.3K. And to your point, it's going to force that is going to force like a very specific build structure with cheap punt receivers and people like Kate Otten because there's just no other way to get, or Yosh Navas, there's no other way to get it. Especially if you want to play a bring back like Jamar Chase on the other side. Similarly, Joe Burrow, less so because Yoshivas is free now. But before, when you had T. Higgins in, who was mid-priced, Joe Burrow doubles were very similar to Hurts doubles. The big difference there, of course, and Tribe pointed this out in the write-up, I think in the bakery and also in Discord today, is that Hurts stacks are going to be substantially less owned than Burrow stacks, especially now with Yoshivas. It's going to be even more stark of an ownership difference. But let me ask you this: if you're trying to get up to Hurts or Burrow, and this is almost easier to see if you go to QB range of outcomes than in the team stack range of outcomes. How comfortable are you? And I think I know the answer. Even for a guy like Burrow, who yes gets some production through his feet, just saying fuck it, like I'm not going to force a double because it's just too pricey and I'm giving too much up at my other positions, and just saying I'm just going to single it with just do a Burrow chase. I think Burrow Yoshivas is a little cute. I probably wouldn't do that, but especially given Yoshivas will be chalky. But just saying like Burrow chase or just saying Hurts, AJ Brown. How willing are you to do that as opposed to just saying I'm going to double them?
Yeah, it just goes back to what I said earlier, where I think you can kind of kick the correlative heuristics that we have to the curb this week, because I think the chalk, or I think the value is just not very good. I will push back a little bit and say that I think that Burrow Yoshivas is not super duper cute. I think that it's kind of cute, but I don't think it's super cute, because Jamar Chase at 8,500, I think you kind of have to think of him as a 1v1 against somebody like Tyreek Hill or Jay Brown. Like there are a lot of expensive. Actually, I won't say expensive. There are a lot of wide receivers that can match the ceiling of Jamar Chase this week. And while Yoshivas will be popular, he will not be popular as a single stack with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
So that's actually a very unique way to use Yoshivas if you want to utilize Yoshivas' value, which I will support that.
I think that's totally fair point. Yeah.
But to the question of whether I would go with single stacks on expensive guys like Burrow or like Hurts, and Hurts has not been using his legs much this year. So I do think that it is actually a question of whether you want to use him in a single stack. Yes and no. I think it's kind of hard. I think the question on that is more of, would I use CJ Stroud with just Diggs or Dell? Because that's expensive and projects very well, and the team total is very good. And the matchup is terrific, right? Like, people have wanted to attack Indiana or Indianapolis for weeks now, and yet for some reason Houston is low owned. I don't fucking understand these people. But that's a situation where if you wanted to go like CJ Stroud with Tank Dell instead of Stephon Diggs, and then utilize Tyreek Hill and like AJ Brown or Jamar Chase, and say, I'm going to use the expensive money that I would have on Stephon Diggs on somebody like Hill or Chase instead, I think that's a really interesting and fair way to go about it. So from like you can use this as a rule of thumb thing, I think that if you're going to use a QB +1 this week on a QB that doesn't necessarily use their legs much, like a Stroud or a Burrow or a Love, you know, one of these more expensive QBs, I would rather do it with their cheaper wide receiver 2 or tight end 1 and utilize the money that I have for their wide receiver 1 on a Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Because I think those guys are just way undervalued.
What's really hard about those QB pay-ups, and this is why I'm like really struggling to use them, is that it's not just that their pairing partners are expensive in Jamar Chase or AJ Brown. It's also that the range of outcomes for Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow and even CJ Stroud on a relative value standpoint is not very strong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love is a little better because he's 71, not 75. CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, if you look at them all in the range of outcomes in the QB tab, like they're 2x, 3x, 4x. And some of this is like not just relative to this slate, but relative to other slates in general, 2x, 3x, 3x for quarterbacks. But even relative to this slate, like their 3x is 22, it's 21%. And you compare that to Lamar at the top. I mean, we've already talked about Lamar. I'm not going to continue to hammer this home, but he's just such a strong play this slate because of his for all the reasons we've already mentioned that I won't go back over because people are tired of hearing it. But even if you forget Lamar, who's such a strong play, all of us are playing at least one Lamar stack. It does make you sort of say to yourself, like, do I really want to force like a Burrow, Hurts, even a Skinny when I can play like Anthony Richardson, who's got like a really good 2x, 3x, 4x with even one or two Houston bringbacks, or Tua with like really cheap partners, and even to go against ourselves, like fucking Aaron Rodgers. Like if you look at his 2x, 3x, 4x, to be clear, I'm not playing him. But I think that is what is hard about the slate. It's like, it's sort of like, do you force it? Understanding that it's kind of going, it's a very long-winded way of saying that the pricing is tight and it forces like some narrow paths to victory with some really thin value you're going to have to force in to use those guys. And it sucks because like those are quarterbacks you do want to play and those are receivers that you want to play them with. But to your point, the ways you can do it are you can just be willing to say, you know what, I'll play Burrow with Yoshivas and then I'll play AJ Brown coming back, right? Or just if you can do away with some of that traditional building structure, I think that allows you to be much more successful on a slate like this where pricing is really tight.
Yep, that's the moral of the story this week. And that concept that you just said of Joe Burrow with Yoshivas and bring it back with AJ Brown instead of Jamar Chase, I think that's a very, very fair way to look at utilizing medians rather than utilizing correlation. Because what you're saying is, yeah, Jamar Chase is a good play, but he does eat up a lot of my salary. So is there a way for me to be different or unique with a very popular stack and unlock a little bit more upside or unlock a direct pivot, and that pivot can be AJ Brown, which is indirect correlation, right? So I think that's kind of the moral of the story this week, is just looking to kind of kick the general correlation heuristics that we have and look for ways to utilize the values that we have in a way that doesn't utilize the shitty value. I guess I'll put it that way. Or you can just build a Baltimore stack with Cedric Tillman on the way.
Yeah, Baltimore is the key to this slate. It's like just so. I'm actually like I'm like thankful that Miami's so chalky and that Burrow is going to get steamed a little bit now because of the Yoshivas Higgins thing. That I'm like thankful that it's saving Lamar stack ownership. Like it's wonderful.
And we love this kind of thing, and what it ends up being is we're gonna either place last with it or first with it, and we're both gonna be so stoked that we came up with the idea up until the point when something bad happens and Lamar like one fucking touchdown. We're like, but
because we're gonna hedge with the Tua stack. That's why, because we're gonna hedge with the Tua stack and or figure out a way to play a Burrow stack. That's why we built three. If you're listening, Lee, just build two or three. You don't have to build one fucking lineup. So I think if there's one saving grace to the slate, and I do feel this fairly strongly, I do think it's a really, really strong running back slate. There are no less than like 10 to 12 plays I really like at running back. Mm-hmm. And some of them are not even that owned, right? So like let me just talk about the owned ones for a minute, and then I'm gonna just talk about pivots. Okay. The owned ones are by far Breece Hall, right? I think Breece Hall, I'm gonna give my like 1 line or 2 line hot take on the chalk and how good or bad I think it is. And I think it's more important to define how you feel about it the more owned the player is. Like yes, chalk is always important to analyze, but the chalkier the chalk is, the more important the decision is to play it or not, because the more you get burned if you don't use it, and it goes off. I think Breece Hall is fine. He projects really, really strongly. I don't think his price is high enough where you're giving up a whole lot, especially uh, given the alternatives at receiver that don't have in that 70 at 7K to 7.5K range that don't really come close to his median or ceiling. So I think he's fine chalk. I don't think he's like an absolute must have. I worry a little bit about the game environment. I do think that I do think that there is some risk that Rodgers passes a little more. I mean, that offense is going to be changing. It's fine. Like, I think it's fine. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's fine. I think it's decent chalk. Um, I'll probably play at least in my 3. I'll have him in 1, maybe 2. But I don't think it's like an absolute must. You have to play Breece Hall. I think he's good. I think it's a good, fine chalk. Javonte Williams. What I like about Javonte Williams, and I don't know how much the Bo Nix cash ownership will translate into GPPs, but usually in small field, there is some carryover from cash lineups into smaller field ownership. So I don't think anyone's going to play, maybe not anyone. I don't think it's going to be very common to play Bo Nix and Javonte Williams. And because of that, Bo Nix's ownership makes me like Javonte Williams a little bit more because I think it's a little bit of leverage off Bo Nix. Yes, Javonte Williams catches some passes, but he's not like a super pass heavy running back. I mean, but his utilization rate the last couple of weeks has been really, really strong, and the game itself is sets up in a way where they could just pound the rock against a really weak Carolina defense, missing their quarterback, and just control the ball and play a really boring game. And he may just get like a ton of volume. So I think he's also decent. And I think what I do like about him is that he is some leverage off Knicks. Achane projects really, really, really strongly in a range of outcomes. I think he's fine at 6,200. All the Miami guys are just so fucking cheap that like it's really hard to knock too many holes in them given their price. Mixon is the next. I'm just doing this by ownership, not in any sort of. I sorted by small field own in our sheets. I think Mixon is an extremely strong play. He's going to come in, I think, a little lighter than we expect because he's 7,700, and like I don't know if people have been noticing what Mixon has been doing this season. I think people who pay close attention have, but I think people who are casual watchers, given he kind of finished his Cincy career kind of on a low note, he's been extremely strong, and his range of outcomes in the sheets is phenomenal. And I do think he'll be owned, but I don't think he'll be anywhere close to Breece Hall or Javonte Williams. And so I just think he's a really strong play, even as a one-off, or if you want to play like A-Rich, who projects decently, and just play Mixon opposite him. And then after that, we get like a lot of really strong plays who are not owned. And just to name some of them, right? Like in terms of median but also combining that with range of outcomes. J.K. Dobbins will be somewhat owned, so he's not sneaky, but good median, good ceiling, good range of outcomes. Bijan, everyone hates playing him for good reason. Won't be owned at all in a game where Tampa may just get, Tampa, like everyone's assuming Tampa's going to be able to piece it together because they're really well coached and Baker's been good, but like they're missing Godwin and Evans. Like there's a chance that Atlanta just controls the ball all game. And then DeAndre Swift. I mean, DeAndre Swift is, I think Daniels is probably going to be out. We'll see. But if Daniels is out, like DeAndre Swift has been fucking great. And his 2X is the third highest on the slate. And his median and his ceiling are, top 10. So he's a great mix of ceiling and median and upside and relative value at the same time. And then the last point, which is like not a sexy play at all, but I think his ownership will be kept in check because people will just play Achane, or they're going to play to some degree Dobbins, or just pay up and get to Breece Hall, which will be the most common approach. Is it's not exciting, but and Javonte Williams is what I meant. Javonte Williams is going to be super owned, which will keep this guy really low. Is Kareem Hunt? I mean, Kareem Hunt is like not exciting to play, but he's and he's a bit more touchdown dependent than some of these other guys. But he's also a very strong play. And then the last one I'll mention, and then I want your takes on these, is James Conner. If you do want to bring back in that Miami game, he doesn't project amazingly well, and that's true everywhere, but he gets plenty of volume. And I don't think Miami needs to be pushed, because I think this is like they're looking at this as a get right spot, especially with Tua coming back. So I don't feel a strong need to have a bring back on Miami stacks if I can't get there. But I think you could do a lot worse than James Conner. This is more of a Jason ball watcher note, but Miami's missing Zach Sealer in the middle, who got hurt in practice yesterday. No one's talked about that for some reason, but they're going to have a gaping hole in the middle of their defensive line, and they're just going to pound the rock against them with James Conner. So anyway, very long-winded way of saying that there's a lot of really good running back plays. So as constrained as we feel by our stacks and by the price of the receivers that we want and the lack of really good value at receiver, we do have a lot of flexibility at running back. And I think that's where we really need to be thinking about how you pivot to get leverage in your lineups. The easiest way to get leverage in your lineups this week is going to be to play some of these lower owned running backs who are really strong plays.
Yeah, good breakdown. I think that Breece Hall chalk is kind of thin. It's a little thin, only because his performance has not been great. His usage has been great, but his performance metrics aren't awesome. And they're on the road against New England, who plays tough. Like, that New England's not good, but they play tough. And at 30-something% owned with a million other running backs, I don't love it. The two best running backs on the slate, I think by a large margin, are Joe Mixon and Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams at home after having a massive role against the Panthers, who are gonna trot out Bryce fucking Young. This is a spot where you just play the running back at home against the worst team in the league. And on top of that, Carolina is the best matchup in the league for running backs. They give up 8.3 fantasy points above average to opposing running backs. They're allowing 41 yards over average to opposing running backs, man.
Yeah.
They're basically allowing a guaranteed 100-yard game against other running backs. Javonte Williams, I think, is, even if he is 35% owned, which he might be, I don't think he will be, but he might be, that's probably still too low owned. For 6K at home against the Panthers, that's been a smash spot all year. The other running back that I do think is really, really nice is J.K. Dobbins. It's because I think that Las Vegas is an absolute shit show. Or not Las Vegas. The Saints are an absolute shit show.
Yeah.
And again, at home, running back as a favorite on a team that is solid against a team that's an absolute trash can. And he's relatively expensive. I don't think that J.K. Dobbins, like, when I look at these ownership percent.
No, I think he's going to get squeezed a bit. Like, he's going to be owned, but he'll be nowhere close to Breece Hall, and I think he'll be substantially below Javonte Williams.
I don't think that he'll be owned. I don't think he'll be over 10% owned. I think he's a single-digit ownership running back. And the reason why I say that is because I think that Breece Hall is going to get 30-something%. I think that Javonte Williams could touch something like 30%. And I think that Devon Achane, however the fuck you pronounce his name, is also going to be like 25% owned. And Mixon is going to get 20% owned. So, like, those are the four running backs that I think are actually going to get ownership. And when you think about the way that people build, I think it makes sense. Breece Hall at 7,300 paired with Javonte Williams. Joe Mixon at 7,700 paired with Devon Achane, right? Like, that's a pretty classic mid-tier, expensive tier running back combo. So, J.K. Dobbins is just right in the middle of all those guys. He's going to be like 5% owned. He's going to be nothing owned. And it's a really, really good spot. I think it's as good of a spot as somebody like Javonte Williams. And granted, you get $900 more on J.K. Dobbins, but I think it's a really good spot. what I will say, because I think you broke down all of them fine. I don't think I have that much to add. What I will say is that I think that you can look at running back two different ways. You can either look at it as leverage on stacks that are going to be popular. So in this case, we would be considering using Zach Moss or Devon King, right? Because Cincinnati and Miami are going to be chalk. Or you can look at it as kind of this chalk is good and I'm going to get different with my stacks, which is at least that's the two ways that I look at running backs. So I don't really like Zach Moss, and I like Devon Kane already, but he's going to be really popular. So if I can't really get leverage off of the stacks with the running backs, then I think what I'm just going to do is just eat chalk here. I might just be the opposite of you. The running back that I don't like that much is Breece Hall. I think that Breece Hall I think that Breece Hall is a worse play than J.K. Dobbins when you consider ownership. Like, in that same price range. So I'd much rather play J.K. Dobbins, and if I can drop 30% ownership by just going J.K. Dobbins instead of Breece Hall, then I think that I'm fine with just eating chalk elsewhere. That being said, I don't think that the lower owned running backs are bad. I really like DeAndre Swift. I really like Kareem Hunt. I think that James Conner is probably an okay play. I don't like him as much as you do, but I think it's an okay play. Josh Jacobs is only 6,600 against the trash can that is Jacksonville. Like, there's a lot of running back plays that I think you can have. But with running backs, and I've talked to Blender about this on the RotoGrinder show, running backs are just scoring 18 to 23 fantasy points. That's like what every single running back is scoring this year. So if like every running back that produces scores somewhere between 15 and 25 fantasy points, right? Like we're talking maybe 7 to 8 to 9 points difference between the best performing ones and the worst performing ones within a deviation. If that's the deviation that we're dealing with here, do I really care about finding my leverage there? Probably not. Like, I'd much rather find my leverage with wide receivers, who the high-end ones are scoring like 30 and the low-end ones are scoring like 12 or 9 or whatever, right? So there's a larger deviation between nailing wide receiver on the high end and the low end than there is on nailing running back on the high end and the low end. So I think this week I'm just happy to just eat chalk. I'm just going to slam Javonte Williams and Joe Mixon and Devon Kane and maybe have an off shot at Kareem Hunt or DeAndre Swift if I end up being weird. J.K. Dobbins, like, those are the 5 guys that I'm into, and I'm probably just going to eat a lot of chalk.
I don't disagree. I do think there's going to be a significant fall off between Hall, Williams, maybe Achane, and those guys after them. Like, I actually think Mixon is not going to be that owned. Like, he's 7,700. Like, part of the reason I like him so much is because he's 7,700 and people want some of the expensive wide receivers. So I actually think you're going to get a little bit of leverage with Mixon. That's how I feel about it. But maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm right, because it's going to be wonderful if we get him at like 10% or 15%, not 20 or 30.
That'd be sick. I'm into that.
I don't have a ton to say about wide receiver other than what we've already said, which is like, just be willing to be creative with your quarterback. So don't feel like you have to play the pay up wide receiver if their relative value, it makes it really hard to get some of the other plays that you want. Where I do think we should focus for a minute on this slate is on tight end, because whenever we have like really condensed chalk at tight end, I find it important to point out that should inform our approach from a build structure standpoint. And we should also ask ourselves if we want to play that really high owned guy. This week, I think, by far the highest value play will be Cade Otton. And it just, he's 3,500. Tampa has to throw the ball to someone. People feel like he's relatively safe. He's for sure going to be the cash tight end. And what I would say about it is this. And he projects like very strong for all those reasons. from a median standpoint. What I would say is that there are some pivots in his price range that are also really strong that will be nothing owned because he's so owned. So if you want to play Brees Hall and you want a little mini correlation, you can pay 300 more and play Hunter Henry across him, who has basically the same projections Kate Otten for $300 more at fractional ownership. And then the other thing I'll say is that if you can get some value through in a different way, like through Tillman, or if you want to pay down at your quarterback, then I think when there's a chalk tight end that's going to be this chalky, you should be more. And this hasn't been true this year, but you should be in general, like the winning lineups haven't been. This hasn't held true as much as it has in years past. Be willing to think about paying a little up at tight end to be a little bit different in your build structure. So getting up to Njoku or even McBride, if you like that Miami game, as a bring back. And I agree. I don't like love Connor or McBride. I actually don't mind against playing Miami on without a bring back. Or Evan Ingram, who projects really well and who's gotten fed. And what's nice about those guys is I'm not saying you're paying up to like the old like super pay ups. Like these guys are Evan Ingram is 5K and Njoku's 5.1. So they're not priced in a way that is price prohibitive for your lineup, but and you have to understand, like, yes, like Kate Otten is getting you a median of 11. And I understand that his ceiling in our sheets is 24. I don't know what his sort of 60th, 70th, 80th, 90th percentile outcome is. I would venture to say like he has a fairly tight range unless he scores 2 touchdowns and just gets lucky of being between like 11 to 17 or hitting a floor game and getting like 8. Whereas someone like Njoku or Trey McBride, if you feel like taking a chance on someone who's a little pricier, their median ceiling combo has a chance at getting you more leverage on the field than going cheap. Or again, just play Hunter Henry for $300 more, who has a very similar range of outcomes and won't be owned. I feel the need to point that out. I don't think Kate Otten's like a horrible play because I think they need to throw the ball to someone. He's 3,500 and we're looking for value on this slate. But I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm not looking for ways to avoid him.
Normally, like when I'm building out, I kind of have tight end in the back of my mind of which one is going to be super chalky. I have not thought about Kate Otten once while actually building. Like I haven't thought about him at all.
Yeah, that's because you're finding creative ways to build where you don't need him.
Right. He's a good play. He's fine. He's a good play. I wrote him up in 2 different places, I think. He's a good play. But I didn't find that he was a super necessary play. That being said, I think that if you use Kate Otten, like, you're probably trying to use him in a way that is interesting. And what I would say is that if you're using Kate Otten, I would be more likely to use a double tight end build and be like pretty unique with the way that I build out my roster construction and really just lean into that value. Like there's no reason why you couldn't play Kate Otten and David Njoku together. There's no reason at all. There's no reason why you couldn't play Kate Otten and Trey McBride in the flex in a Miami stack. Right? Like you could totally do that.
Yeah.
So I just think I think he's fine. I don't have a problem with him. I don't even think that you should necessarily be going out of your way to fade him. I think that if he fits and makes the lineup work, like he's a good value. But I also don't think that he's somebody that you should be starting lineups with. I guess that's what I'll say. Tight end to me this week is very much, I like 2 tight end builds with the expensive guys, and I like correlating my quarterbacks as always. But like, I don't feel that Kate Otten is some massive, I have to play this guy play.
Yeah. I want to just emphasize something you just said about double tight end, because I feel like this has been coming up the last 2 or 3 weeks when people are looking for value. And I'm happy to have a debate if you disagree, but I doubt you do. When I'm looking at my flex position, I'm pretty much agnostic to whether they're running back, wide receiver, or tight end. Like I don't care. Like I don't care if it's to me wide receiver and tight end. I just in my head they're both pass catchers. The only reason that it's more uncommon for me to play a tight end than a wide receiver in the flex and not do double tight end is that usually there is a wide receiver who's cheap enough in the same position that I would play the flex double tight end who has a higher chance at getting at a ceiling that's going to get me to a top percentile outcome. But on a slate like this, when you're looking for value, it's, I think, not unreasonable to be asking yourself, like, am I playing a Kate Otten in the flex with another tight end like Njoku, who projects as like one of the strongest point per dollar plays, or Yoshabas, or Jalen McMillan, or Cedric Tillman? And the short answer is like they are all like fairly similar point per dollar plays. So, like there's this weird thing people do where they're like, it's the tight end. So I don't like double tight end builds because I don't like playing two tight ends. And they're labeling it such because it's tight end. I just think in your head in general, people should just be removing the tight end label and thinking about median and ceiling. And if you need the value and the tight end has the same median or ceiling or better than the same priced wide receiver, then there's no difference between them. I don't think that's a hot take, but maybe you disagree.
No, yeah, I'm gonna do something that we don't usually do on this, but I'm going to share my screen really quick. I'm gonna show. This is, if you don't have a sub here, then you should go get a sub. But this is looking at the overall range of outcomes, and I just sorted by 4x. And tell me what you notice about this list. Tight end, tight end, tight end, tight end, tight end. And the only wide receivers that really show up, I sorted this by 4x, so this is sorting by value. Cedric Tillman shows up as a good value. And then you have Devon Achane at 6,200, Jamar Chase at 8,500, Jalen Waddle at 5,400, and then tight end, $7,300 running back, tight end, quarterback, $6,500 wide running back, cheap wide receiver. Like, there are no mid-range values. There's no fucking mid-range values. So why would you not just plug in a Brock Bowers at 6,100? Like, why would you not do David Njoku at 5,100? There's nothing wrong with doing that. The thing that you have to think about, this 1v1 right here, right? Kate Otten versus Cedric Tillman. What is the realistic tail outcome for Cedric Tillman? Is it considerably better than Kate Otten? Like, considerably better. That's the reason why you would play Cedric Tillman over Kate Otten in the flex. With, say, like, David Njoku versus Jalen Waddle, right? 5,100 versus 5,400. Is the tail outcome for Jalen Waddle considerably better than David Njoku? Note that their projections are within 1 point of each other, right? If you think that Jalen Waddle can score 30 fantasy points considerably more often than David Njoku, that's the reason why you play Jalen Waddle in the flex. But for the most part, man, like when you sort by value and you see that you either have to use a basement wide receiver or an expensive option at running back or wide receiver, or use a tight end, probably fine to use a tight end. So that's the visual that I want you guys to maintain on that.
Yeah, and so I think what you're doing through that visual is it's a visual representation echoing what I was saying, which is whether you play a tight end in the flex or not is a function of those players and their relative value relative to the other options you have. It has nothing to do with them being a tight end or not. I want to point that out because there's this weird thing where people like label it and they somehow treat tight end differently than the other skill positions. And I think it's strange, and I think it's important to point it out on a slate where the relative value makes double tight end builds more valuable than they normally would be.
Yeah, the last thing that I will say on that is I do think that double tight end builds when using two punt tight ends, I will basically never do that. because in that instance, what you're basically saying is that you're okay with two players who maybe have a ceiling of 15. That's whether it was a wide receiver or a tight. Like I won't use a cheap wide receiver in the flex either because they just don't have a ceiling for the most part. Like I'd rather use a high 4K or low 5K wide receiver or tight end or whatever. Like usually when I do double tight end builds, I am looking to unlock that 20 plus fantasy point range. And somebody like, I mean, even K. Dotton, if you think that K. Dotton is going to be an absolute target monster tomorrow and he's $1,500 underpriced, I could see him using him in the flex. But I'm even reticent to use somebody like Cedric Tillman. I'm and the models love him. So that's the only caveat that I will make here. I do think that it's worth, but that's not really a. I don't want to use tight ends in the flex. That's a. I don't really want to use somebody who I think has a low ceiling in the flex.
Yeah, and it's also speaking to like the number of players that you have that have a fragility to them. There's like cumulative fragility in your lineup, right? Like at some point you get stars and scrubby enough where you say, okay, I'm playing like the three best payups and I'm playing like the three cheapest guys. Like, what are the odds that all three of the cheapest guys, none of them bust, right? Usually the cheapest guys are going to have some fragility, right? I'm not saying like K-Dotton is super fragile. I'm not saying that at all. Like the range of outcomes suggests he's not super fragile. But I am saying there is some cumulative fragility in like playing three punt guys. And that I think can be kind of dangerous. And that is something that sometimes optos will push on a slate like this when you want some of the pay ups and there's not great value.
Yep. With you.
Cool. Those are my high level thoughts. I mean, I know we've been a little more macro heavier on this slate, but I think it's important, more important on this slate than all. It's weird. What's weird about this slate is that we talked about at the beginning. Like there's a lot of games with high totals, and yet it's priced in a way that makes it harder than you would think to build on first glance. Like you're like, oh wow, I'm going to have like a million plays to choose from, and I do think there are a lot of strong running back plays, but there are a lot of really good running back chalk. And so, it actually is a slate. I think the biggest takeaway that we've repeated a few times here is just like a willingness to build more creatively than you normally would and do away with some of the more conventional correlative building that you would usually go and try to do. And just be willing to say, like, I just have to play these guys who are good relative value while still being aware of their ownership, because unfortunately, most of the strong relative value plays are not super sneaky. And so, you can easily fall into a cash lineup. So I think it's one of those slates where you have to be a little more aware of your cumulative ownership, because the relative value is not going to be as sneaky as you might think. Like there's only like a few plays that are, I think, like I agree. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be squeezed a little bit. I'm happy to eat crow if I'm wrong, but I do think Mixon's going to be less owned than we would think. He's like my favorite, like not sneaky play, but because I think he's going to be squeezed because of roster construction, I don't think it's like as easy to get to him as you would think. So I don't know. Do you have any other big picture thoughts or small picture thoughts, or we can also answer questions?
I think this kind of my main thing that I'm going to leave this with. I already said it earlier, but I think this slate is very much just built around roster construction and kind of avoiding typical correlation heuristics that we have. I don't think that I really care that much about correlation this week. And that leads me to kind of that idea of that meme where it's like the dude on the left is some fucking brain dead dude, and the dude on the right is a Jedi, and the dude in the middle is just like some fucking soy jack weirdo that's pissed off. That's what it reminds me of. Like the dudes on the left and the right are just like, oh, just play the best plays, and the dude in the middle like, no, I have to correlate my lineup with my quarterback, and I have to use this much on X, Y, and it's like, I just don't be mad about correlative stuff this week. I think this is a really interesting week, and that there are, as much as we just talked about a whole bunch of things that make this slate hard, there are actually some easy buttons. Like Miami, I think, is an easy button. I don't think that there's... I don't have a lot of reasons to not play them. I think there's enough ways to be different that you can just play them. Baltimore stacks are kind of an easy button. They're going to be low owned for whatever reason. They have a lot of upside. There's interesting ways to stack them. You can bring it back with some cheap options that make sense. Like you can full out just like game stack that game and have 5 players from the game. Like it's an easy button. So I do think that there are, after going through it, I think that there are enough easy button spots to be like, yeah, I can fill out a decent part of a portfolio with these easy button spots, and then you can kind of just play the best plays and ignore the typical way that everybody else is going to play with the rest of the spots that are a little bit harder to build with.
I'm going to leave it with, and again, we can answer some questions if people have them, but I'm going to leave him with one player, even if you're not playing Lamar stacks, that I think is like a weird player to love, but I'm going to explain why I love him. I love Rashad Bateman this week.
Oh yeah,
and I love him because he's 4,300, so he's high enough where people are not going to be punting to him like they will Otten or Tillman or Yoshabas. He has gotten superb usage the last couple weeks. You have good bringbacks, and Zay Flowers is a little bit banged up. And the sheets think his range of outcomes is fantastic. He has the 5th highest 2x. Again, at a price that will keep him really low owned. So I just want to say, play Rashad Bateman. I feel very strongly about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think Rashad Bateman's a terrific play. And models have been on him for a couple weeks now. Pater usually ahead of the curve on guys like him. So happy to have that. Any questions before we get out of here? We ran a little bit over, but this has been a really good kind of like long-term talk, I think.
Yeah,
I do have
about Jameis Winston versus whatever's left of the Ravens secondary. That's already been bad.
I think that James Winston's a fine play. I don't have any problem with it. The only concern that I have is that the team total is so low. At 16.75, that's kind of reserved for like the bottom of the barrel offenses on a slate. So like you usually see like the Raiders or the Patriots or the Panthers down there in that 16-point range. And so if we think that markets are generally effective, we should assume that markets are generally effective there and not think that Jameis Winston is some savior. I would have less concerns if the team total was like 20 plus or something like that. But to your point, the Baltimore Ravens defense is not very good.
They've had one good game, and it was at home against Buffalo.
They
Every other
have
game has been terrible.
They have not been great. They've been giving up a lot of extra yardage. What I will say is
the Dallas game was actually good, and then they just let up like 15 points in garbage time, which is fine because that's what we would play for in fantasy. So,
right? Yeah, we don't give a shit. It's DFS. We're fine with that.
Jameis is great in garbage time.
We're happy with that. They do give up 70 yards over average. They give up 2 passing touchdowns per game. Like I'm fine with it. And we did talk about it being a relatively low owned piece. I think. What I would rather do, I would like to have Lamar Jackson, but I do like a game stack of that game overall. So like 4 wide receivers or tight ends from that game, totally good with it.
Yeah. I also just think like, first of all, like I just prefer to have Lamar Jackson because of the reasons we talked about, his ceiling, pairing partners, and like he's like the only quarterback on this slate that allows you to build in somewhat of a traditional fashion with the bringbacks. I think like I have an easier time believing Lamar plus Bateman and or Flowers or Likely or Andrews with Njoku or Tillman gets you there just from a pure like from a pure raw standpoint than I do believing like Winston gets you there. I guess it's a long way of saying that I sort of prefer the Lamar side or even like a mini of like Bateman and Njoku or like Bateman Tillman. I don't think it's like I don't think it's crazy because Winston is so cheap. I share those game total concerns, and I would rather just be on the Baltimore side and have like I think even though they have an 18.5 total, it makes me nervous to play Winston doubles, but it doesn't make me that nervous to play Njoku or Tillman. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I like him a lot
Njoku's
more
target
than
share all come from Deshaun
Owen.
in that game.
Say that again.
What was that?
Like this, and Njoku got 14 targets. Did that all come from Deshaun before he got injured? I didn't see the game.
No, Jameis threw him a touchdown. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure it was to him.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
Njoku.
yeah, because Njoku caught the last touchdown. Yeah. So
Cool.
But I don't understand how like people are that heavy on like Bo Nix, and that's more of like a mixed feeling / run first offense, and then they're like not as high on Jameis, who's gonna throw it 100 times.
Well, because Carolina fucking blows.
No, I know that, but you're not gonna like you don't win with Bo Nix like ever.
Well,
Especially
he
in,
had
like,
he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Let's not discount
Yeah.
him to the point of like saying that he's the worst player on the
No,
planet.
it's just a testament to the need for value, right? Like people are just like trying. I mean, it's a great matchup, and you're either getting value in the form of like eating chalk Miami, you're getting value in the form of playing into some chalkier value pieces like Kate Otten or Jalen McMillan, or you're playing a cheap quarterback. That's what it is. I mean, if you want to play Hurts or Burrow and Jamar Chase and AJ Brown, not Burrow or Hurts, obviously, because we're talking about Knicks, but if you want to play some of those pay up flex positions, that's what it is. I mean, so from a relative, I get it from a cash standpoint. Like I think his median on a point per dollar basis is like arguably like I actually think he's like an okay cash play. I just think he's a shitty GPP play.
Yeah.
And so Winston is a bit of a straight line pivot in terms of price, where you're like, well, like I might as well just play like a guy who may chuck the ball a ton, who's got 2 really cheap pairing partners in Njoku and Tillman, and who has nice bringbacks in Bateman or Flowers. But I just share James's concerns about the game total, and I would just rather have the Lamar side and use Njoku or Tillman or both if you want to game stack it.
Yeah, it just comes down to the salary usage, I think. But it's not that I'm against Jameis Winston and his options. I just would rather have Lamar Jackson.
I want to say one thing about roster constructors. I've been building a little bit here towards the tail end just to see kind of what I'm liking. I think one of the most important decisions this week is actually going to be Breece Hall. Like, because if you play Breece Hall, he's not crazy priced at 7.3, and we've talked about him. Like, he's okay chalk, but I basically I feel the same way you do, James. Like New England plays decent enough defense. It is a division game. They know each other really well. These games can be of a slog. There is a chance that Rodgers is going to be a little more pass happy now that Devontae Adams has been around for another week. I think there's reasons to be willing to fade him. But he's going to be really, really owned. But if you play him, if you fade him and you play like J.K. Dobbins or DeAndre Swift or Kareem Hunt or Mixon, it really changes your lineup quite a bit. And so I just want to point out that I think Breece Hall is probably the most important piece of chalk that you really have to think through this week.
Yep.
From an actual roster construction standpoint, and it kind of sucks because like as much as I want to fade him, like I also it's a little scary at the same time. So I'll have some. I'll just have to make a decision where I'm fading him. It's probably going to mostly depend on how much leverage I feel like I have around it for my field size.
It's scary, but there is also 8 or 9 other running backs I like that I think have just as much of a ceiling or better. I mean, there's so many options to get different, and it, like you said,
Yeah.
it instantly changes your structure or your construction. I'm super under the field on Hall this week, and I feel really good about it. So
yeah. For what it's worth, I mean, one of the hard things about football is sample size, as we all know. He was in a very similar position. I think it was like week 3 or 4. Like it was 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he didn't really get there. I mean, I don't know that who knows. Like I hesitate to even bring it up because it's like saying a baseball player went over 5 and they're like, oh, I'm not gonna play him tomorrow. It's like
No,
it was
you're right though. It's probably been about a month or I remember that. Yep.
and it was very analogous. Like it was like a good game. He projected really well. He was really, really chalky, and he basically like got like a 30th percent outcome. Like it was fine. Like you were way better off had you faded him.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those questions. Like when I think about these situations, I ask myself, like, what are the chances I get like fully burned by the fade? Meaning like I can't recover from who I played instead or whatever value it got me in my other positions, right? And so like Nico Collins a few weeks ago, remember when we talked about him? Like we all knew, CD Lamb a few weeks ago, same thing. Like there's some situations where like there's not viable alternatives that are getting me this median and this ceiling, raw point wise or even point per dollar wise. And I guess because of all the alternatives at running back this week, I'm feeling probably more willing than I otherwise would to consider fading him. So anyway, I do think one nice thing about fading him is like if you do that and you go down, if instead of playing Brees Hall with Williams, Swift, Mixon, whatever like choice of those like best 3 to 5 running backs that you choose, if you go down on 2 of them, if you play like Williams and Swift, or Williams and Dobbins, or Williams and Hunt, or Swift and Hunt, right? Or you go up to Mixon, who's a little more expensive than Hall. Like those combinations are all still really strong, and you're getting a lot less ownership. So, anyway, I thought I would bring that up again because I think it's such an important part of roster construction this week.
What I will close with also is to your point on Nico Collins, why he was such strong chalk, and why we were just like, yeah, fuck it, we're just gonna eat 40% owned expensive wide receiver, was because it was hard to replicate his upside in that spot relative to the upside on other spots, and that's kind of how I feel about Tyreek Hill this week. As much as I think that Tua is kind of shaky, we'll say shaky, I guess. If that offense is even like 80% of what it was last year, 7K Tyreek is going to bury you at 35% owned.
Yeah.
You will not recover if you don't have 7K Tyreek putting up 25 fantasy points. You just won't. Especially because of the roster dynamics on the slate with such a lack of value. He is arguably the best value on the slate. Arguably he's $1,800 underpriced. So that's kind of what I want to close with, is I think that Tyreek Hill is just like, I don't see a reason to fade him. We talked about a whole lot of other things on this slate, but every single one of those in the back of my head was like, yeah, I can make Tyreek Hill fit with this. So yeah. I just feel like he's just that Nico Collins spot where you're not going to survive if he has an 80% outcome.
Yeah, it's funny with DFS, like I think it's really important to be aware of your own biases, especially when it comes to fandom. I personally will like heavily discount my own takes on teams that I cheer for, because it's human nature, right? Like you're gonna want those players to do well, and you're probably gonna overweight what you want to happen. And so mentally, even today, like in the Discord, I had written like, I know all of you guys hate Tua, like fuck all of you. Like I was 99% joking. But I was like fully ready to come in here and be like, look, I get it. Like I understand why everyone thinks Miami's shaky chalk. Like I get why you want to play Tyreek Hill. And I was gonna say what you just said. But I'm glad you said it, because it makes it sound like it's not just homerism, where if I would have said it, people were like, dude, you just like Dolphins. It really has nothing to do with me liking the Dolphins. I do love that I'm going to be at the game because I think there's a decent chance that Tyreek Hill just goes fucking nuclear tomorrow, and I'm going to be there to watch it.
Well, good for you. Really happy for you. All right, I'm gonna end this.
Cool. Yeah. Do people have questions though? I mean, we don't have to do it on stream, but people may have questions.
Yeah. I'm gonna end the join here. This has been great, but yeah, I gotta start writing kind of the framework for the article tomorrow, and yeah. So if you guys got questions, feel free to ask. Pablo, you might hang around the Slate Talk a little bit. I'm gonna jump off, but then I'm happy to answer questions in the NFL chat tomorrow morning as well. So thank you guys for joining us. This has been Slate Talk, part of Theory Crafting for Paydirt. If you guys like this kind of stuff and want us to do this a little bit more often, let us know. We did do an NHL one a couple days ago that we thought was really, really nice. So maybe we'll try to do a little bit more. Maybe we'll try to do one for NBA here pretty soon as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't checked out the site, please do. And if you don't want to, then fuck you. We'll win without you. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys on the next one.